Um, it was Hank Williams and Webb Pierce and Tennessee Ernie Ford country, and then there was
For over half a century, Van Morrison has been one of music's most brilliant and notoriously grumpy figures. He's a true enigma. The man's voice can tap into the deepest roots of soul, blues, and Celtic mysticism, giving us transcendent masterpieces from the ethereal jazz of Astral Weeks to the pure R&B joy of Moondance. But right alongside that musical genius is his legendary temper. Van the Man is famous for his battles with record labels, his prickly interviews, and the sky-high standards he sets for his musicians. To him, music isn't a job. It's a sacred calling, and he expects that same devotion from everyone who shares the stage with him. For decades, the famously cantankerous Morrison has kept his specific feuds under wraps. We all know the reputation, that he's difficult, that he's fired musicians on a whim, but the juicy details have mostly been backstage whispers and rumors, until now, or so the story goes. In mid-2025, a wild story started making the rounds online, sending shockwaves through the music world. It was a video with an explosive title. At 79, Van Morrison finally reveals 6 drummers he hated the most. According to this report, Morrison, on the verge of turning 80, finally spilled the tea, naming 6 world-famous drummers he either couldn't stand working with or couldn't bear to listen to. The claims are shocking. The alleged quotes are absolutely brutal, and the reasons given cut right to the heart of what Van Morrison believes music should be. But here's the million-dollar question. Is any of it real? Did Van Morrison actually unleash a lifetime of rhythmic rage on some of rock's biggest icons? Or is this just another piece of internet myth-making, a story that's simply too good not to be true? Today, we're going to get into it. We'll count down the 6 drummers named in this completely unconfirmed report and explore the supposed clashes. But more importantly, we're going to be music detectives. We'll scrutinize the claims, separate the facts from the very compelling fiction, and try to get to the deeper truth about Van Morrison's relentless, lifelong quest for the perfect beat. Before we open this supposed can of worms, we have to understand the man and his musical laws. For Van Morrison, drumming isn't just about keeping time. It's definitely not about flashy solos or brute force. To him, rhythm is a spiritual, organic thing. It's the human heartbeat, the pulse of life, the subtle, hypnotic groove that lets a song breathe and climb to a higher plane. His first influences weren't rock and rollers. They were the raw, unfiltered sounds from his father's record collection in Belfast. He grew up absorbing the earthy cadence of bluesmen like Leadbelly and the soulful cries of Mahalia Jackson. This wasn't music built on technical perfection. It was built on pure, raw feeling, and that became the bedrock of his soul. Throughout his career, Morrison has looked for drummers who just get it. Players like Gary Malaber, whose work on the Moondance album is a masterclass in taste, giving the songs a fluid, supportive pocket for Morrison's voice to work its magic. Or you can look to longtime collaborators like Jeff Lardner, a drummer known for his feel, his ability to listen, and his dedication to serving the song above all else. This obsession with artistic control is a hallmark of his career, forged in the fire of his nasty disputes with Bang Records in the late 60s. After his producer died, Morrison was trapped in a bitter contract. To get out of it, he had to deliver a bunch of new songs. In a now legendary act of defiance, he went into a studio and, in one session, recorded over 30 short, nonsensical tracks with titles like Ringworm, Want a Danish, and The Big Royalty, Check. These revenge tracks were a deliberate slap in the face to the label, a clear sign that his art would never be compromised. This is the man at the center of our story. So, let's see who this viral report claims failed to live up to his impossible standards. Kicking off the alleged list at number 6 is a drummer who was less a timekeeper and more a force of nature, the one and only Keith Moon of The Who. On paper. This is a comical mismatch. Van Morrison, the introspective poet searching for quiet, mystical spaces in music. And Keith Moon, the human firework, a guy who played his kit like a lead instrument, filling every ounce of space with glorious, chaotic noise. The unconfirmed story claims that Morrison saw Moon's style as the polar opposite of his own philosophy. The viral video alleges Morrison once quipped after hearing a Who track, "The drummer sounds like he's falling down a flight of stairs with his kit, and he's enjoying the tumble." Now, let's be crystal clear. There is absolutely no credible evidence that Van Morrison ever said this. This quote appears to have been born in the sensational 2025 report and should be treated with a huge grain of salt. So why does this fabrication feel so believable? Because the artistic gap between them is a mile wide. The Who were all about sonic aggression. Pete Townshend's power chords and Moon's explosive drumming were pure youthful rebellion. Keith Moon's job wasn't to create a pocket for a singer. It was to be an equal, often dominant voice in the sonic assault. His drumming was a spectacle, a key part of The Who's high-energy shows where he was famous for literally blowing up his drum kit. Contrast that with Van's ideal. For him, the drummer's role is service. It's about creating a subtle, breathing landscape. Think of the delicate brushwork on Astral Weeks. That music demands space and nuance. Van's music is a quiet, intense conversation. Keith Moon's drumming was a joyous, magnificent riot. The story, while almost certainly invented, perfectly captures this clash. It frames Moon not as a bad drummer, he was a genius, but as the exact wrong kind of drummer for the spiritual journey Morrison is on. At number 5 on the alleged hate list, we find another rock titan, Carmine Appice. Known for his groundbreaking work with Vanilla Fudge and his thunderous beats for Rod Stewart, Appice basically wrote the book on the hard rock drummer as a flamboyant powerhouse performer. According to that same unverified video, Morrison's supposed beef with Appice was all about theatrics. The story claims there was a brief audition in the 1970s that went south fast. Morrison allegedly stopped the music and declared, "I'm trying to paint a landscape, not host a fireworks display." Again, we have to wave the big red flag. It's a great story. It's also completely unsubstantiated. There are no official records of this audition, and attributing the quote to the late producer Tom Dowd makes it conveniently impossible to check. But just like with Keith Moon, the idea behind the story hits on a real artistic conflict. Carmine Appice was a showman. He understood the visual, visceral punch of rock and roll. He had big drum kits, big fills, and an even bigger stage presence. He was a rock star who happened to play the drums. This is the opposite of everything Van Morrison stands for. Morrison notoriously hates the spectacle of performance. He often seems like he's on stage alone, lost in his own world, with the audience as an afterthought. For him, anything that pulls focus from the song's emotional core is just ego. The very idea of a drummer as a performer putting on a show would be a musical crime. So while the story of a failed audition is likely fiction, it works as a perfect parable for Morrison's worldview, pitting his ideal of the selfless musician against the rock and roll showman. The supposed list keeps its sights on rock royalty, with Tommy Aldridge at number 4. A beast behind the kit for bands like Whitesnake and Ozzy Osbourne, Aldridge is a master of heavy metal drumming, famous for his pioneering double bass work and bare-handed playing style. The narrative in the viral video is a familiar one by now, but this time it's focused on two things: volume and ego. The unverified story claims a collaboration was attempted in the 80s and that Morrison shut it down because Aldridge was too powerful and wanted a drum solo. The video attributes a truly scathing quote to Morrison. "I don't hire drummers to, masturbate in public while I'm trying to create something beautiful." It's crucial to repeat that this is entirely unconfirmed. There's no independent evidence of this session, and that fiery quote is found nowhere else but this single, shady, online source. It has all the signs of a tall tale spun for clicks. But let's unpack the myth. Why pick Aldridge? He represents a school of drumming that prized power, precision, and athletic showmanship. His double bass drumming was a core part of the heavy driving sound of his bands. For a drummer of his stature in that genre, a solo wasn't just an option. It was practically expected. This is exactly what would, in theory, send a shiver down Van Morrison's spine. His music lives and dies on dynamics, the interplay of loud and soft, the space for his voice to float and soar. A drummer whose default setting is loud and who sees a song as a launch pad for a solo would be a nightmare. In the jazz and soul circles Morrison comes from, a drum solo is often seen as a selfish act that breaks the collective musical conversation. Tommy Aldridge becomes the perfect symbol for everything Morrison supposedly hates about modern rock drumming: ego over service and volume over sensitivity. At number 3, the alleged list takes a sharp turn from hard rock to new wave with Stewart Copeland of the Police. This one is fascinating because Copeland is widely seen as one of the most innovative drummers ever. His style, a unique blend of punk energy, reggae beats, and complex rhythms, is iconic. So what on earth could Van Morrison have against him? According to the sensational 2025 report, the issue wasn't creativity, but restlessness. The unverified story claims Morrison couldn't stand listening to the Police and allegedly said, "Stewart's playing like he's having a nervous breakdown behind the kit. He can't sit still long enough to let a groove develop naturally." Once again, these are explosive claims with zero proof. The Police and Van Morrison moved in different universes, and there's nothing to suggest Morrison ever gave Copeland a second thought. The anecdote feels perfectly crafted to fit the video's agenda, but the stylistic clash is very real. Stewart Copeland's drumming is hyperactive by design. He's famous for his intricate hi-hat work and his tendency to dance all around the beat. His style is jittery and full of nervous energy, the perfect engine for the Police's tense, spiky pop rock. He didn't just play a beat, he constantly commented on it. This is the total opposite of Morrison's hypnotic, meditative ideal. A song like "Listen to the Lion" builds its power through repetition, through a slow burn over a stable rhythmic foundation. From that viewpoint, Copeland's style would feel like a constant interruption, preventing the groove from ever casting its spell. In this narrative, Stewart Copeland represents the clever modern drummer, too focused on showing off their chops to understand the simple, profound power of just sitting in the pocket. We've reached the second-to-last spot, and it's a name that's probably launched 1,000 arguments in comment sections: Lars Ulrich of Metallica. His inclusion shifts the focus from rock and new wave to the relentless aggression of thrash metal. The unverified report portrays Morrison's feelings here as pure revulsion. The video claims Morrison saw Ulrich's style as the complete annihilation of dynamics and subtlety. It spins a tale about Morrison firing a session drummer on the spot for playing an Ulrich-style pattern, supposedly yelling, "I hire drummers to create sanctuary, not to simulate battle zones." It even alleges Morrison called his drumming sonic terrorism. It's vital to say, flat out, that there's no credible evidence for any of this. These quotes are extreme and almost certainly fabricated for maximum drama. Van Morrison has never publicly mentioned Lars Ulrich or Metallica in any known interview. So why make up such a wild story? Because Lars Ulrich represents a complete break from the Morrison school of rhythm. Ulrich's style isn't about groove in the traditional sense. It's about power and aggression. He often locks in with James Hetfield's guitar riffs, creating a machine gun assault that is the backbone of Metallica's sound. It's a style designed for maximum impact. To a purist like Morrison, who values organic flow, Ulrich's precise riff-based style could easily sound sterile or robotic. Metallica's music is a musical war zone, and Ulrich is its primary artilleryman. The fake quote about battle zones is a potent metaphor. Lars has also faced his share of criticism from other drummers over the years, making him an easy target for a made-up hate list. The story casts him as the symbol of an era where rhythm became less about the human heartbeat and more about the cold precision of a machine. And here we are, at the #1 spot on this explosive, unverified list. The drummer who supposedly earned Van Morrison's ultimate contempt. It's not a metalhead or a punk anarchist. It is, maybe surprisingly, one of the most successful musicians of the 1980s, Phil Collins. The story laid out by the video is one of profound artistic betrayal. It claims Morrison's issue wasn't about Collins's pop stardom, but about something far more specific, his signature gated reverb drum sound. That sound, big, bold, explosive, was pioneered by Collins and engineer Hugh Padgham and became the defining sound of the 80s. It was everywhere. According to the video's totally unsubstantiated account, Morrison supposedly said of Collins, "Phil has taken everything organic about drumming and run it through machines until it sounds like robots playing. He's murdered the human heartbeat and replaced it with digital death." Let's be absolutely clear. This is an unverified and almost certainly fabricated quote. There is no record of Van Morrison ever saying anything of the sort. The story seems engineered for the most dramatic finale possible, the organic purist versus the ultimate, symbol of 80s production. But the fake story is clever because it's built around a real seismic shift in music. The gated reverb sound, that huge badoom snare, first heard on Peter Gabriel's Intruder and made world famous by Collins's In the Air Tonight, was a product of studio technology. It was powerful, dramatic, and distinctly artificial, too. A musical purist like Morrison, this would be the ultimate sin. His entire quest is for authenticity, the sound of real musicians playing together in a room. The idea of processing a drum kit until it sounds like robots would be his worst nightmare. It's taking the most fundamental human part of music and rendering it inhuman. The alleged quote about digital death is pure melodrama, but it perfectly explains the conflict. Placing Phil Collins at #1 makes him the ultimate villain of this story. The man who, in this telling, fundamentally broke drumming by replacing soul with technology, and that's the alleged list. A wild ride through rock history packed with explosive claims that are, as far as anyone can tell, completely made up. But what do you think? Did this viral story have you fooled for a second? And more importantly, which of these supposed feuds surprised you the most? Does Van Morrison's purist philosophy make sense? Or is it just the ramblings of a grumpy genius? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We read them all. And if you enjoy digging into music history and separating fact from fiction, make sure you hit that subscribe button. So in the end, what's the takeaway? We've explored a tantalizing rumor that claims Van Morrison named the 6 drummers who violate his musical code. We've looked at the so-called list: Keith Moon, Carmine Appice, Tommy Aldridge, Stewart Copeland, Lars Ulrich, and Phil Collins. Each one a legend, and each one representing a style of drumming that seems completely at odds with Morrison's search for an organic, human groove. However, after all that, we've found no credible evidence to back up any of it. The quotes seem fake, the anecdotes are unsubstantiated, and the whole thing feels like a cleverly constructed piece of internet folklore. But just because the story is bogus doesn't mean it's meaningless. It uses these 6 drummers as archetypes to brilliantly illustrate the very real principles that have guided Van Morrison's entire career. It's a story about the battle between the organic and the artificial, between soul and spectacle, between the human heartbeat and the cold precision of a machine. We may never know if Van Morrison secretly has a burn book for drummers. He remains, as always, a glorious enigma. But the fake story itself reveals a powerful truth about his music and his unwavering lifelong commitment to his own unique, mystical, and uncompromising vision. He is, and always will be, Van the Man. Thanks for watching.